Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am back for my Week 2 NA Academy review, overview, and at the end, my updated power rankings. Sorry that this video is coming out a little bit late. I know on my schedule, I usually try to release these on the weekend. This is kind of my weekend video, but real life caught up a little bit. The weekend was a little bit tough for me this past week, so it's coming out on a Wednesday. Apologies on that. I still wanted to make it. This is usually my day off, but I will be taking it to make my Academy video today, so hope you guys are excited for that. If you are, go ahead and leave that down in the comments section below. And of course, go ahead and like this video if you are interested in Academy. I love making Academy videos. I watch it anyways. I'm very, very passionate about the NA ecosystem, and I love talking about it. There's a lot of fun players and a lot of good League of Legends that we get to see in the Academy scene that we don't normally talk about, so I'd like to be one talking about it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into our first series of the week, and that was Dignitas Academy taking on Cloud9 Academy in a 2-0 win for Dignitas, who have started out the year pretty hot. A lot hotter than I expected them to, and a lot hotter than I think a lot of other people expected them to as well. Of course, still a caveat, Cloud9's Academy team is still not their actual Academy team. They're still filling in with a lot of amateur players. Really, I believe it's only Copy and maybe King. I believe Sven is not playing in Academy, although I'm still not sure about the details there. It looks like they're trying to get a visa for him, so whatever ends up happening there with Sven, whether or not he becomes non-import and he can play in Academy, I'm not sure, but for now, I'm going to say that Copy and King are really the only two members of this Cloud9 team that are actually playing for the Academy team later on in the year. 3 substitutes is a lot, but Dignitas has honestly shown that they're pretty good, and definitely a lot better than the 10th place ranking I had for them in my preseason power rankings. XU especially is actually just really good. There's really no other way to say it. He's been a major surprise at the start of this year. He looked really good at lock-in, and he actually has looked really good in Academy here as well. He is my player of the series here. He looked great on the Poppy in Game 1, and they just demolished Game 2. Game 2 was not close, even a little bit, and a big part of that was his Lee Sin game. But everybody else also played really well. Want to give a shout out to Spawn and JJ in the bottom lane, who have started out the year strong, keeping that synergy going from 2021, keeping that going into 2022, looking good. Eclipse and Darkwings have had their moments. Darkwings especially had some really good moments in week 1. He had a little bit of a worse week 2. He still looked really good this series. Everybody did. And then Eclipse maybe is the weak point of this Dignitas Academy team. Still very young, though. Somebody who has had very little time to play actual competitive League of Legends. Definitely still growing. I like what this Dignitas Academy team is doing. I like the direction they're going. And I think this team is overperforming in pretty much every way possible. So, looking at Cloud9, like I said, it's really hard to judge how good this team actually is because they're playing with so many subs. But the players we can judge, like Copy was actually probably the best performing member of Cloud9 in this series. His Akali game in Game 1 was pretty good. Akali into Victor is a matchup I tend to kind of favor. Although I think it can go either way, really depending on who you are. The draft in Game 2 was a little interesting. If you're going to pick the Akshan on the top lane, I think that's a totally valid pick, especially into something like Jax. Maybe not into Jax, actually, because, the auto attacks. But, if you want to try to bully something out of lane like Jax, you got to get support for that. Udyr is not the support you need for that. Udyr, I think, is a pick right now that is quite weak in the meta. Definitely not something that's there to support it. You have a Twisted Fate to help that lane as well, but just generally, I don't think that this comp is very well-rounded, especially if you're leaving up that pick like a Jax or a Sylas, or even a Lee Sin does really well into this comp because you have to get that Akshan ahead early, and it just wasn't going to happen here. So Lawrence is going to be my dud of the series here, although, he is going up against much better talent than him. It's not really his fault. He's fine. He's okay. Really, the talents that we're looking at are Copy and King, who were both meh. King, I thought, needed to play better. He got outplayed by Spawn in this series quite drastically, and that's not something I would have said last year. So definitely a slow start to the year for King. He's actually, ever since he's come over to NA, he had that amazing first year in 2020 in Academy where he just dominated. And then last year he took a little bit of a step back, in my opinion, and this year it looks like he's taking another step back. Not the best development track record to be excited about, but definitely not the worst. And then Copy looked good when he was given some resources. He's going to be the player to watch while the rest of this team is out until they can get everybody in. So it'll be interesting to see where this team goes. I don't want to rate Cloud9 too much though right now, but yeah, Dignitas is looking great, and I expect them to only get better as things grow with them. Moving on to our second series here of day 1, we had Golden Guardians Academy taking on Team Liquid Academy. A nice 2-0 win here for TL. You got a couple changes. Hyeri is back in the lineup. That young upstart rookie mid laner Bjergsen has returned to the LCS, has helped TL win lock-in pretty consistently. Or pretty obviously, I should say. They easily looked like the best team there. But we'll get to lock-in when we do our LCS power rankings in a couple of days. Look out for that. But the series was interesting. It was a pretty clear Team Liquid win. Golden Guardians was a team I think I had a lot of hype for. They've played so many games in the past few weeks. It's absurd. This team still isn't at quote-unquote full force, I don't believe, because Stixxay is still in there. I do believe he will eventually switch over to ADC position coach, and then Violet's going to come in. At least that's what I believe is going to happen. I don't know if Violet's just not in the country yet, or if he's still quarantining, or what the deal is, but Stixxay is still in there for Golden Guardians. As it is now, Team Liquid thrashed them. They were the better team in this series by quite a bit. Honestly, all of their members looking really good, but the big standout ones, the player of the series for me, Bradley in the top lane. He is really acclimated to playing top lane a lot quicker than I expected, although it's not like his champion pool has really changed that much. He played 2 games of Graves here. He probably played some Graves in the mid lane before, at least some, maybe not a lot, but at least some. And he looked really good here. Tony Top has kind of struggled out of the gate. He has very much struggled in lock-in. He even struggled a little bit in the amateur tournament, the Proving Grounds circuit. So, I'm a little bit concerned about Tony Top. Maybe this team isn't as foolproof as I thought, and we'll get to a couple other members who are underperforming in a minute. But Bradley looking really, really good here, role swapping to top lane. He's been probably the biggest bright spot of this Team Liquid Academy team so far in the year. And then Armeo also had a great series on the double games of Jarvan going into the Xin Zhao. He heavily out-jungled Iconic in this series, although that's a statement we've already said at least a couple times this year. But a good series from Armeo. It's good to see him pick a champion like Jarvan who wants to gank early and get early leads, which is exactly what he wants to do. But sometimes he fails to actually maintain those leads, and this time he kept him. He got Bradley ahead, and he got Yeon ahead down in the bottom lane, who, just for style, ended up playing Varus in Game 2, which I was really interested in. We're not seeing a lot of Varus right now. Poke Varus can still be a really big problem, and, you know, something like Ezreal Karma can really struggle to deal with it, which it did. So, yeah, a really good series here from Bradley, Armeo, and Yeon. Hyeri and Rhino were fine, but they weren't necessarily the big standouts. 2 games of LeBlanc, you would expect more from Hyeri, but again, it's his first series of the year, so I'm not going to take too much away. And he's going into one of the better Academy mids. As for Golden Guardians, this team is just not as good as I thought they were going to be. Some of these members, I think, are heavily underperforming. Most notably, my dud of the series here, Iconic. He has been not good in 2022 so far. As somebody who played in the LCS and honestly didn't look, like, terrible in the LCS last year, it's really sad to see him come back down here to Academy and be really underperforming. He has probably been the worst member of this Golden Guardians Academy team, along with Tony Top, that top side of the map. Hasn't been great. Stixxay and Chime, I think, are fine. They have been consistent. Again, you're still waiting for your actual AD carry to show up, and then Ryoma has been good, but there's only so much that you can do as one mid laner playing like Sylas, trying to win a game. So, Golden Guardians definitely needs to get it together. Iconic needs to get it together. But a good win here for Team Liquid. Bradley looking great in his new role of top lane, and the rest of the team kind of coming together. They're probably still going to be one of the contenders. I had them first in my power rankings to start the year. Dropped them a lot after a really slow week 1, but they look like they're still in that range of being one of the best teams in Academy. Moving into the third series here of day 1, we had TSM Academy taking on 100 Thieves Academy in a 2-0 series win here for the Thieves. They looked really good here, just kind of outskilling TSM, I think, in general. TSM has a game plan. They definitely have a clear game plan, and it's one I personally disagree with, but we'll get into that. Let's talk about 100 Thieves first, who just dominated topside of the map this entire series. It was really, I guess I'll spoil it. This series was almost entirely about the top side of the map. Gamsu versus Viper was a large part of which team was going to win this. And Kenvi and Hyper both spent a lot of time up there, and Kenvi definitely got the edge in that matchup. Gamsu got the edge in that matchup. My player of the series is going to be Gamsu here. He had a really, really solid series. Game 1 on Jace, he was doing so much damage. And then that game 2 on Tryndamere, he was basically unkillable, although you could argue that Kenvi set him up for a lot of that success. Both of them basically deserve it. They had great series here working together. This isn't a combination that I expected 100 Thieves to go in, because Gamsu's not necessarily the lane that you want to typically play around. He's pretty commonly weak side, or at least he was last year. I expected Jimmy in to be a big focus for this 100 Thieves team, but they've so far wanted to go bot and top, and that I can kind of respect, especially in a meta right now where, you know, if you're going to pick like Senna Braum in the bot lane, like you did in Game 1, or even Ezreal Braum in Game 2, focusing on that Tryndamere, focusing on that Jace, that's a good idea. Get those guys ahead. You know the Ezreal's going to hurt late game. You know the Senna's going to do stuff late game. You're not going to worry about it too much. You've got the Ryze, you got the TF. You got things that can help across the map. Just let Gamsu get super far ahead. I do like the playstyle with these drafts. Kenvi does pull out the first Kindred of 2022. That is a pick or a ban. This is the first Kindred sighting of 2022. We always know that Kenvi has loved that pick. It's a pick that's pretty partial to a lot of junglers here in North America specifically. North America and Korea, I think, are the big Kindred regions from what I've seen. Mostly North America. But the Kindred and then Italy coming out here, two picks I wouldn't necessarily consider strong, but again, very early focused, very dueling oriented. A lot of fights, wanting to get that top lane ahead. That's exactly what happened. That was pretty much the game plan from 100 Thieves. They executed it perfectly. As for TSM, that was also their game plan. Unfortunately, they just weren't nearly as good at it. Hyper spent a lot of time top lane trying to get Viper ahead. There were a lot of 2v2s. Did not happen. Viper is my dud of the series here. They're putting a lot of resources into him, and he is not winning right now. I think this is a not as good strategy, in my opinion. I think you have your best player on the team in the mid lane. Your second best player on the team is probably your support. You need to focus elsewhere. Takeover can take over, pun intended, games when given resources. He's on the Corkies, on the Victor. Get this guy ahead. You're going into a Ryze and a TF. These are matchups you can abuse, especially on the Victor. You should be able to attack in that matchup. Even Instinct and Yursan. I know ganking Ezreal Braum or Senna Braum is like really tough, but you have a Jinx. If you can get the Jinx hyperfed, the Jinx should be able to deal at least with the Jace. And just not much happening there macro-wise from TSM, which very much concerns me. Overall, not a great series from TSM Academy. Probably their worst of the year, one of their worst of the year so far. Kind of a bad look. And a good series from 100 Thieves, winning through top lane, which is something that, while I don't necessarily think it's their main game plan, it's good to see that they have it in their bag of tricks. Moving on to game and series 4 of day 1, we had Immortals Academy taking on CLG Academy in a battle of two teams that are kind of at the top of the Academy power rankings right now. And CLG with the commanding 2-0 series win here, looking really, really good overall. Honestly, these games were a lot of fun to watch. Two of the best Academy games of the year so far, especially Game 2. If you like lower region play and just kind of seeing the development of players, Game 2 of this series is probably the best Academy game we have seen so far. I would check it out. But I'll quickly go over it. Game 1 was a little bit open-ended, but still a decent win for CLG. Dokla and Rosethorn just got too powerful by the end of the game. Ezreal was doing too much damage. Palafox is always good on Aurelia. They really had no chance of losing. And then in Game 2, some fun leading up to action. You get a Baron play where Rosethorn dies going for Baron as CLG, but Prismal is just too good and he wins the fight by himself on the Aphelios. Prismal, if you can't tell, is easily my player of the series here. He was phenomenal. Way too good. He is way too good to be playing in Academy. It's pretty unfair of CLG, in my opinion, at this point, to have both Luger and Prismal in their organization, because one of them isn't going to be playing in the LCS, and I don't think that that's fair for the LCS. Both of them are so LCS ready, it hurts, and it's crazy to me that Prismal still hasn't been given his opportunity. He is tearing up Academy again this year, just like he did last year, just like he did the year before. Hopefully he continues on his great spree here. Dokla also had a great series here. One of his more outstanding, like, offensive performances here on the Gwen in Game 1. Yes, he's going into Singed, and Singed is going to die a lot. Concept has that weird champion, pulls out the Singed, pulls out the Scion. We've seen him on the Mundo. He definitely likes to play his kind of tank champions, which I think is fine. I've complimented that in the past, especially in Academy. I think playing the stuff that you are good at and establishing your play style and growing from there is a good way to start your pro career, but it didn't quite work out in this one. Dokla definitely took advantage of that on the Gwen. And then the Shen pick coming out in Game 2, definitely not something we're seeing globally, but I like this pick a lot. Gave a lot of protection to Prismal late game, or Rosethorn going in, whichever one he really wanted to utilize an ult. And then Palafox on those Orianna Shockwaves was incredibly instrumental. As for Immortals, not the best series they've had all year. Their first series loss, actually their first 2 losses at all this year. They were the only team to go undefeated in Week 1, but yeah, definitely some problems in this one, mostly stemming with topside. Chad was not great in this series. He's going to be my dud of the series. He's had some good moments. He's had some bad moments. This was one of the bad moments. Not the best series overall. Pretty poor Xin Zhao game 1. Pretty poor Lee Sin game 2. We know that he can bounce back from this. He's had a great start to the year. He had a great last year when he subbed in on 100 Thieves Academy. You know, it's just a bump in the road. Going up against Rosethorn, who is one of, if not the best jungler in Academy right now. You know, he struggled a little bit, but it's definitely not something to be entirely worried about. Concept, the same thing. He's just played his first Academy games last week, and yeah, he looked good, but teams are starting to figure him out. I think those Singed, Scion, Dr. Mundo, kind of crazy tank picks are getting figured out, and, you know, we're starting to see teams play a lot more aggressive up on that side, kind of force action so that he can't scale endlessly into that late game and be such a problem. And we're also seeing picks like Shen that can just kind of counter scale him. So definitely getting found out a little bit there. I think Immortals outside of that played pretty well. And by pretty well, I mean pretty played well in the mid lane. His Orianna game in game 1 was good, but his Kassadin game in game 2 was really solid. We've seen very little Kassadin this year, mostly because the meta just doesn't suit Kassadin in lane all that well. He's going to be going up against things like the Victor, things like the Vex, which are just tough matchups for him generally. But when you can get that scaling on your side, we've seen with Azir that can be pretty good in the meta. And he did really well in game 2, almost led Immortals to a win. And while Arrow was kind of the MVP of week 1 in Academy, I think he definitely got outplayed by Prismal in this series. So definitely worth noting. Not that Arrow and Joey are bad or anything, but Prismal and Breezy I think are just that good. Prismal and Breezy are probably the best bot lane in Academy right now, although Arrow and Joey might be number 2. So not a lot of terrible takeaways for Immortals, just kind of a growing series here as they play one of the better teams, but what a solidifying series from CLG to prove that some of these players are definitely LCS ready. Moving on to our final game here of day 1 of week 2, we had FlyQuest Academy taking on Evil Geniuses Academy. A nice 2-0 series win here for EG. FlyQuest continues to struggle, but EG looks pretty good here. Although the games were a lot closer than I think EG probably wanted them to be, they do pull out the win. Off the back of their best players playing really well. And their best players being Jungle Mid and ADC. These are the players that we expected to kind of come into the season and be ready, and they absolutely were. Kaori especially has come in and is, you know, one of the best AD carries in Academy. He's very much feeling like the Luger of 2022, where he comes in and is immediately just super good and way better than the level that he is playing at for the region. He had 2 really good games of Jhin. That game 1 especially was really good. He dominated. Game 2 is really important towards the end. His ability to stay alive in fights is actually insane. But Tomio, I want to give a big shout out to Tomio. He had a rough week 1. Was kind of a big reason why this team maybe didn't take off as strongly as they wanted to. In week 1, he had 2 much better games with Jarvan here. His game 2 was very important for them to secure that win. His early game got Kaori some kills, and it got Saligo some kills. It got Surdy some kills as well. And Saligo had some pretty good games on the Orianna. Surdy struggled a lot in game 1, but he bounced back in game 2, second game of Camille, you know, kind of warmed up. Surdy's a young player. He has a ton of really good raw mechanics, and while he struggled a little bit, I thought he played much better in that second game. Skytech, I think, is also someone who is developing at a rate that I'm, you know, really astounded by. It's kind of what EG does. What we saw last year out of Skytech was fine. He was good for the amateur scene, but I didn't expect him to make the jump to Academy so seamless. And he kind of has. He's been really good at the beginning of this Academy season. Him and Kaori have formed a really strong bot lane. So overall, a really good win for EG. A lot of their players looking much better than they did in week 1. As for FlyQuest, they continue to struggle. They have bright spots, but they do continue to struggle. Philip is going to be my dud of the series here. He was a weak spot for this FlyQuest Academy team last year as well when he came in at the mid-season break. But he just hasn't really developed in a way that I think has been quick enough for me. He struggles to go into really aggressive matchups. His laning phase, I think, is mostly what struggles. And that's what worries me, is laning phase is something that I think you want to be more natural at than maybe the teamwork aspect of the game. You can learn the teamwork. I think it's much harder to really develop a strong laning phase, and I think Philip does struggle in lane. So, you know, 2 games of Jace here getting absolutely bounced by the Camille, I think is not the best look, although Tomio did spend a lot of time topside, so. And then for positives on this FlyQuest team, I think Spirax actually had a much better series here in week 2 than he did in week 1. 2 games of Victor. I think he's definitely much more comfortable now than he was, you know, a little bit ago. I wasn't a huge fan of Spirax, you know, coming up from the amateur scene last year from the Proving Ground circuit, but he continues to grow and he continues to get better, and that's kind of what you're looking for out of Academy. Tomo and Diamond continue to be meh, underperforming in my opinion. This should be one of the best bot lanes in Academy, but right now, they're just not. We get our first Janna game of the Academy split. That's fun to point out. But other than that, not really too much to actually talk about here. Yuji is just fine. Him and Spearax really do need to develop something, though, if they want this FlyQuest team to do anything. Outside of that, yeah, a good series for EG. Everybody kind of bouncing back at least a little bit. Even the players who didn't play particularly well in one game probably played well in the other. So, yeah, a shout out to Kaori, who's my player of the series. Again, he's having a phenomenal start to the year, and I expect him to only continue to get better. Jumping into day 2 here of Academy action for week 2. We had a historic rivalry kicking us off. We had TSM Academy taking on CLG Academy. Probably the 2 historic LCS teams having their Academy teams face off here. And for the first time in a while, CLG comes out on top. A 2-0 win here for them. They are just the best team in Academy. There really is nothing else to say right now. They are firing on all cylinders. The only question mark that you could have about this team is whether or not Triple, who's coming in to replace Palafox, assuming at some point, is going to be playing on the same level that Palafox is playing right now. But if you can get even part of what you're getting from Triple, if Dokla, Rosethorn, and Prismal continue to play like this, CLG will be the best Academy team this year. There won't be much question about it, because they're phenomenal right now. Prismal is, again, going to be my player of the series here. He is just too good. He is simply too good for this level. There is no reason for him to be playing here. He has been here for too long. The fact that Luger's ahead of him and it means that he's probably not going to get a shot this year is absurd to me. But this new CLG era, you know, you got new general manager coming in. You've got a lot of new infrastructure coming in. They replaced a lot of the staff this year. It is certainly off to a hot start, and I can definitely say that I like the direction that this organization is going if you have talent like this in your Academy system. Prismal and Rosethorn, I mean, they could be on the main roster by the end of the year. I know I've talked a lot about contracts and Luger. I think they're good players, but golly, these two are playing unbelievable right now. Both games for Prismal on Aphelios. Both games he absolutely dominated, especially late. Rosethorn on Jarvan seems to be picked that he can just take over the map on. And then Doko's honestly been fantastic in the top lane. You know, you're going to get a lot of fantastic top lane performances when you have a bot lane that's so successful like this, but Dokla, you know, being in those 1v1s is winning them really easily against a guy like Viper who has been in the LCS before. So, you know, everybody on this team's just playing really solid. Breezy's playing really well, playing a lot of Thresh, but still playing really well. Just everyone's cooking for CLG. As for TSM, not so much. This is not a great week here for TSM. Takeover is actually going to be my dud of the series here. He is kind of the carry of this team. He is definitely, in my opinion, the best prospect on this team. He hasn't really had a great start to 2022. I'm not willing to say, like, oh, I'll pull the plug on him, but, you know, we've seen this before with TSM Academy mids where they've not necessarily lived up to expectation. Most recently, Sword. Even a Blaze Olive before that really didn't live up to expectation until he left and went to Golden Guardians Academy. Was fantastic for their Academy team and is now really, really solid on the LCS level. But Takeover kind of following suit, not being really good, definitely not living up to what he was last year. Definitely his worst series of the year so far, finally given at least a little bit of attention, and wasn't really able to do anything with it. But it's not like anybody else played much better. Viper got destroyed in the top lane by Dokla. Instinct and Yursan were just, they never stood a chance against Prismal and Breezy. They're not even in the same class. And then Hyper is not as good as Rosethorn either. They just kind of got outclassed at all 5 positions. And it's going to happen. This is still a young team. Hyper, Takeover, Instinct, and Yursan are all players that you are growing. Viper's really the only quote-unquote veteran on this team. And so you're going to take some hard losses here, especially to a team as good as CLG Academy. But the trick is to not let it discourage you, to hopefully say, all right, well, we may not have done super well this week, but hopefully we can bounce back and do a little bit better. I know this team has potential. Hyper had a pretty good week 1, and we've seen it from Takeover and Yursan in years past. These players can be good. We just need to see it on a consistent level. But right now, you know, whatever we're saying about TSM cannot apply to CLG. CLG is, I mean, just phenomenal. These players will be in LCS sooner rather than later. Moving on to the second series here of day 2, we had Cloud9 Academy taking on 100 Thieves Academy in a 2-0 win for Cloud9 that I think surprised a lot of people off the back of King just playing really well. I criticized him earlier in the week, and look where we are now. King is beating up 100 Thieves pretty consistently in that respect. Although everybody on Cloud9 played particularly well here. It was a really easy game 1, a much more difficult game 2, but still was able to pull it out because of that Aphelios pick, which we've seen in Academy really just dominates. We've seen it around the world as well, but especially here in Academy, Aphelios seems to be a pick that is really, really dangerous in the hands of these ADC players that are some of the best in the entire league. But yeah, C9 takes the nice win here. King is my player of the series. I was ragging on him a little bit earlier. Big turnaround here, going up against the former C9 amateur AD carry here in Wixie. Definitely outplays him. Some more traditional quote-unquote lanes in game 1. You've got the Jinx Nautilus into the Senna Tahm Kench. And I don't know. The Senna can work, but it's got to be in the right scenario. This was not the right scenario. Tank Ryze, I do not think is the mid laner to make Senna Tahm Kench work. But then you look at game 2, much more traditional lanes, but the Aphelios is just such a strong late game team fighter. King was able to absolutely destroy by the end of that game. I want to give a huge shout out to Frost Forest. We've talked quite a bit about Frost Forest in week 1. He had some really good games. He had some really bad games as well. He seemed like a very hit or miss player. He was very hit in both of these games. His Jarvan games were really strong. Another pick that I think is quite strong here in Academy. Not a lot of teams have found out really how to deal with it yet. Frost Forest looked really solid in this series. When he's good, he's good. He's definitely at Academy level. There are definitely some Academy junglers that I think are worse than Frost Forest. But, you know, it's unfortunate that he's probably going to be replaced by Malice whenever whatever happens, you know? It doesn't look like he's going to be sticking around. He's definitely been, like, the fun, bright spot, I think, of C9 Academy so far in week 1. And then Copy also had a really good series. Going into Jimmian, Jimmian had some weird picks. I hate the Tank Ryze. We saw that in game 1. Didn't work, but the Twisted Fate and the Vex were really good picks for Copy. These are picks that he's definitely very comfortable on. Things that are typically more his style, at least from my experience. Things like the Twisted Fate, things like the Vex, things that can go in, do their thing, and then just kind of die, or just kind of relax, right? Whatever they want to do, right? They do their thing, right? That's what Copy likes to do, and that's what he did in this series. Lawrence also played well in the top lane. And then Katong also played really well at support. I thought everybody on Cloud9 played really well. The bot lane especially was really, really strong. 100 Thieves, not so much. They had a really good series win against TSM earlier in the week. Couldn't pull it out in this one. Jimmian is going to be my dud of the series here. Pulls out the Tank Ryze in game 1. It's just a pick I don't see working. It's kind of similar to Lucian right now, where I think some people are just falling into the trap of, well, Ryze is a pick I'm really comfortable with, and it's a pick that I think, you know, is good in a lot of scenarios. It can team fight, it can split push, it's good for macro, you know, whatever you want to do, right? You know, you've got the ultimate. Ryze is kind of open-ended like that, but I just think Ryze is kind of a weak pick in the meta right now, and we're seeing that because the optimal quote-unquote build for Ryze is honestly kind of weak. Yes, he survives a long time, but he does nothing in that time. I mean, he gets off roots, that's really it, but his damage is completely lackluster, and he does almost nothing outside of that. So, not a great pick here. You're still picking the Renekton Nidalee. I'm not a fan in a meta where you're going up against a Vex and an Aphelios and an Akali, these picks that are going to really hard outscale. If you're not super ahead early, it's not going to work, and it didn't work. And then, like I said, the Senna Tahm Kench bot lane, to make that work, I think you have to have stronger points of the map than Tank Ryze, and you just didn't have that here. Game 2 was a little bit better, I guess, but still not great. I think Jimmy and Wixie had rough series, and then I thought Kenvi looked good for most of it, but I don't know. The draft here definitely confused me. I thought the draft let the team down, in my opinion. Gamsu and Sword were also a little bit weaknesses for this team. Definitely not strengths, I would say, but Jimmy comes in as the dud of the series. Overall, 100 Thieves definitely has some stuff they need to work on. I think the biggest problem here is draft. And you guys know I'm not one to point to draft very often. In fact, I do it at most like once a week, but this was kind of a draft diff for me, especially in Game 1. Game 1 draft, I think, is pretty inexcusable from 100 Thieves. I just don't like it at all. Game 2 was much better, but C9 just outplayed them. They had one game to outplay them, and they did, so. Just a good series here from Cloud9. It's good to finally get them a series win here. This is our first series win of the year. And, it's good to get some momentum rolling as they're looking to get their starters back into action. Jumping into Series 3 here of Day 2, we had Golden Guardians Academy taking on Evil Geniuses Academy. They take one game apiece here. Both games pretty decisive in favor of each team. Game 1, definitely Golden Guardians all the way through. Pretty much everybody on the team played really well in this one, and actually had some of their best games of the split. I know I was just talking down the Lucian pick, but when you put Lucian in the hands of someone like Ryoma, who is one of the best mids in Academy, even going into another one of the best mids in Saligo, Ryoma really popped off on that Lucian. Stixxay had a great game on the Jinx. So did Chime on the Nautilus. Honestly, everybody on Golden Guardians looking really, really good in Game 1. Tony Top on the Gwen, getting far ahead. Nobody on EG looking good, especially Kaori and Skytech, who had a very, very slow start to the series here. But then, game 2, 22-minute game, absolute thumping from this EG bot lane. They got so far ahead on the Jinx. This pick for Kaori is absolutely nuts and disgusting. I can't imagine what this guy would look like if he got Jinx every single game, because he blows teams up. He definitely woke up and he dominated in that game too. I want to give a shout out to Skytech, who had a great game on the Leona. Very nearly got my player of the series, but Kaori is going to get it there just for his game 2 performance, which was probably the best of either team. And then my dud of the series here is unfortunately going to go to Iconic on Golden Guardians. Just kind of meh. He was good in the first game on Diana, setting up Ryoma a lot. But the game 2, he goes back to the Diana well, gets counterpicked a little bit with the Volley Bear, and just kind of gets torn apart, if we're being honest, in the jungle. He's really been a weakness for this Golden Guardians Academy team to start off the year. And that's not what I expected at all. He's probably the player who I would expect to have the least problem. Maybe him and Ryoma. I expected this jungle mid duo to be very solid going into this year, but Iconic has really been an issue for this Golden Guardians Academy team that I think that they definitely need to figure out, because it was not working out there. But they still did have a good game 1. EG just, I think, had a slightly better game 2. If you're looking for other players who maybe could have gotten the dud of the series, I mean, honestly, you could give it to Kaori for his game 1. His game 1 was pretty poor on the Aphelios, but he bounced back so hard in game 2 that it's hard for me to do that. You could also give player of the series here to Ryoma, who had a great game 1 on the Lucian. It's really just dealer's choice, in my opinion, with this series. Both teams looking solid. Not too much to talk about outside of that. I think these teams are around the same skill level. Both are probably not like top tier Academy teams, but both are good Academy teams. And I think there are a lot actually that fall into that good Academy team kind of umbrella right now. I just think these two teams definitely fall into that spectrum as well. Kaori and Skytech look like a lane to be absolutely reckoned with. They are carrying EG pretty far here. Siligo's playing alright, Tomio's playing alright, Sardi's playing alright, but really it's that bot lane that's like really propelling this team forward. And then for Golden Guardians Academy, Ryoma's playing great, but it's kind of a team effort when they win. They just need to get more consistent performances out of Ryoma, and then hopefully when Violet comes in, he can be a big carry there in the bottom lane with Chime. You're just hoping for that. Tony Top hopefully continues to grow. A lot of really young players, I should say, in the series as well. This is just a good look, I think, for Academy overall. Both teams playing well. Both organizations looking good. Nobody really loses here. Jumping into Series 4 here of Day 2, we had Immortals Academy taking on FlyQuest Academy. And FlyQuest's first wins of the season, both of these the game 1 was their first game win of the season, and then game 2 solidified their first series win of the season against a team that I think a lot of people had considered one of, if not the best Academy teams in the region in Immortals, who went undefeated in week 1. A very big shock upset here for FlyQuest to come out on top, but a good series overall for FlyQuest, and honestly, a pretty poor showing from Immortals this week overall, but yeah, SuperKmanrocks is going to be my player of the series here. He was phenomenal this series. This is the best League of Legends I have seen SuperKmanrocks play. He looked great on the Victor in both Game 1 and Game 2. Outplayed Pretty very heavily. Pretty was, a pretty good Academy mid last year, and SuperKmanrocks outplayed him really, really hard. These are matchups that, while they're not, not Victor favored, they're not particularly Victor favored, right? Like, Corki, Victor should get the push early, but Corki eventually outscales. And then Twisted Fate is honestly just better early, in my opinion. So for SuperKmanrocks to actually just be able to win this, I think straight up, I think is really strong for FlyQuest in general. And then, honestly, Yuji. He had a great series here. He's not going to get talked about a lot, unfortunately, because SuperKmanrocks was so good here. But Yuji, I thought, was really good, especially in that game, too, on the Xin Zhao. Tomo and Diamond are finally starting to come into their own. Philip had probably his best series so far. The Aatrox is definitely a pick I expect to see them go back to. He looked comfortable on that. And I think whatever Philip is comfortable on, get him on that, because, forcing him to play meta right now just isn't working. So if he's comfortable on the Aatrox, even if Aatrox isn't the most meta pick, even though, in my opinion, I think it's totally viable in the meta right now, even if you don't believe that Aatrox is the most meta pick, if he's comfortable on it, if he's going to play like this on it, keep him on the Aatrox. But as for Immortals, a really tough week here. I believe they went 0-4 this week. Not so good. My dud of the series here is going to be Joey. A rough series here, just from everybody on Immortals' side. Pretty, like I said, just got outplayed by SuperKmanrocks in the mid lane, which is not something you want, especially in these matchups. Concept still kind of going to his picks, the Sion, the Wukong, things that aren't necessarily super meta, but they're not out of meta. Didn't outplay Philip, didn't get outplayed by Philip, was just kind of mediocre in the top lane there. Arrow is the carry on the team, and he played all right. Especially in that game 2 there on the Jinx, it was hopefully going to bring it back, but Tomo honestly just played better. Arrow had a really good week 1, but he regressed a lot in week 2. Arrow and Joey as this duo. Maybe I was overhyping what this duo could accomplish in Academy after week 1, but I still think on paper they should be one of the best Academy bot lanes. I think they just had a struggling week, and that's going to happen. Every once in a while, you're going to get these weeks where you struggle. Unfortunately, this was one of them for Immortals. Honestly, Joey or Pretty could have gotten the dud of the series here, or Arrow, honestly. Even Chad. I think all these guys deserved it, but I gave it to Joey just because, gosh, he was just caught out too much, in my opinion. I don't think you can get caught out that much on Thresh. You have a lot of tools to stay safe on Thresh, and unfortunately, just weren't utilized in that way here. Joey got killed a lot, but yeah, there are a lot of things to work on for Immortals. I definitely think this is probably good for the team, you know, in a weird way, right? Dominating Academy is good, but it's good for young players like Concept and Chad to learn how to bounce back. Chad never really had to do that on 100 Academy because they were never down. They were too good. And Concept kind of getting that taste here. I think it's going to be good to see how this team bounces back from losing here. If they can bounce back well, I still think this is one of the better Academy teams overall. But FlyQuest definitely showing some spirit and definitely showing that maybe they're not this consensus worst Academy team in NA that everyone thinks they are, although maybe they still are and this was just a fluke. We'll have to wait and see with future series to see how that turns out for them. That's going to bring us to our final series of Week 2 here in Academy, and that was Team Liquid Academy taking on Dignitas Academy. A very fun 1-1 draw here between these two teams. Both games taking a game in pretty dominant fashion and in good fashion, I would say, overall. My player of the series is going to go to Bradley on Team Liquid, who continues to be really freaking good in the top lane for no reason. His Graves is just unstoppable. This is a pick I expect to see him on a lot because he's played like 3 or 4 Graves games in Academy and they have dominated all of those games. It just feels like every time he gets that champ, it's too strong for him. But yeah, he looked really good. Hyeri had a great series here as well. A great game on Corki in game 1. Yeon, Rhino, both played really well. My weak spot is definitely Armeo, but we'll get to that when we talk about game 2 here, which was the Dignitas win, in which XU just popped completely off. XU is, you know, we've talked a lot about how I think there are a lot of junglers that have come through the North American, like, Academy system, the amateur system, and proven to be really hot commodities. You know, first it was Blabber, then it was Spica, and we're wondering who that next one is going to be. I think XU has a real shot at being that guy. Rosethorn, I think, is another guy who has a big shot there, but XU as well. He just has those intangibles that you can't really teach. The aggression, the outplay potential. He seems to favor these champions that are a little bit more aggressive. Picks like the Jarvan, picks like the Lee Sin. I just love what XU is doing right now, and him coming into Academy, I think, is a huge, huge boon for Dignitas. Even though they're losing, you know, Will, I thought Will was that last year for Dignitas as well, and hopefully Will gets a team that, you know, after, I know he's taking spring off to focus on his studies, but hopefully Will gets a team in summer as well. But XU is looking like a phenomenal jungler for Dignitas here. He looked great in game 2. Everybody else on Dig kind of struggled. Spawn had a decent game 2 here on the Jinx, but I thought Darkwings and JJ and Eclipse kind of struggled here, especially in game 1. They got really trounced in game 1. And then, like I said, on Team Liquid side, my dud of the series is actually going to be Armeo, because he just did Armeo things, and it bothers me to the point where I just have to give him dud of the series, in which he gets these early leads. He knows how to get the leads on champions like Volibear and Jarvan, and then he just has no idea what to do with those leads once he has them. Hopefully he can figure that out, but it looks like he's just going to kind of fall into that sector that is kind of below, you know, we're seeing Viper kind of fall into that now, where it's just like, you know, mid-tier Academy player and nothing higher than that. He's serviceable, but he's not going to be more than that. And unfortunately, he's just got too big of flaws that hold him back, in my opinion. I want him to be more aggressive in the mid game, because it just feels like he plays way, way too safe, and it costs his team a lot. And it definitely did in game 2. XU took full advantage of that. So overall, both teams looking good. I really like how Dignitas looks at the beginning of the season, and Liquid kind of bouncing back from what was a decently disastrous week 1 for them. So both teams kind of performing to expectation here. All right, that is going to do it here for my week 2 analysis and overview of every Academy game. On the left right now, you're going to see the updated Academy standings. Any ties will just be broken alphabetically. On the right, you're going to see my power rankings and how they have changed from last week. You'll notice these are a lot more volatile than they are for the traditional regions. That's just the nature of Academy. We really never know how good these teams actually are because these players are growing at such a faster level than I think a lot of other leagues. It's specifically designed for that. So, biggest risers and fallers, we'll talk about CLG and Team Liquid moving up to the top 2. CLG, in my opinion, is clearly the best Academy team right now. Team Liquid, in my opinion, not far behind them. Both of them don't have very clear advantages, and their weaknesses at the beginning, don't have very clear weaknesses. Their weaknesses at the beginning of the season don't look very weak anymore. You know, CLG in terms of experience, like Rose Thorn, and then, you know, whether or not Triple could come in, I guess is still a question mark, but, I mean, come on. Everybody else is playing nuts. And then Team Liquid, Bradley in the top lane has not been a weakness at all. He's actually been the strength of the team so far. 100 Thieves also jumps up a little bit. Just feel a little bit more confident about them than I do about some teams around them. Immortals, Golden Guardians drop down a lot. Both of them had pretty disastrous weeks. Golden Guardians has some stuff to work out. Iconic in the jungle is not going well right now, and Tony Top definitely needs to get better for them to be a top 3 team. And then Immortals just had a disastrous 0-4 week. Chad and Concept are not ready yet, and then Arrow and Joey took a pretty big step back. Dignitas jumps into the playoffs here, which is nice. They definitely deserve it. XU's just too good to be out of it. Honestly, this team is too good to be out of it. They're playing pretty consistent right now. Evil Geniuses and Cloud9. Take your pick for which one's 7, which one's 8. Cloud9's probably going to jump up a lot once they get their actual team here, but this is the way it is for now. And then clearly TSM and FlyQuest, I think, are the bottom 2 teams. You can switch those two, I think, if you want. I currently have TSM ahead of them just based on talent, but FlyQuest could be the better team. They're just kind of that bottom sector. The player of the week this week is going to go to CLG's Prismal. It can't really go to anybody else. He was just too phenomenal this week. He absolutely dominated both series that he was in. My dud of the week is going to go to TSM's Viper in the top lane. So Prismal is my player of the series. Viper is my dud of the... I'm sorry, my player of the week and my dud of the week, respectively. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like. It really does mean a lot to the channel. Let me know what you guys' favorite series was, how you power rank any of these teams, all that down in the comment section below. I never really shout this out, but I do have a Twitter that's linked down in the description below. If you want to go follow that, you'll get some updates on, you know, my life. I post if videos are running late, like this one is, on there. So go ahead and follow that if you are at all interested. But I hope you are all having a great day. I hope you all continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.